Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn, and I run the services at medcommsnetworking.com and the associated website. So, information resources activities for people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and the associated businesses across the globe. We run these webinars regularly. You'll find, and we record them. So over at NetworkPharma TV, you'll find hundreds of videos now from meetings like this. But the technology allows us to bring people in from all over the world. We've got a good international audience again, and we've got panelists from all over the UK. Today, we've got the guys from IPG Health coming to talk about basically their learning platforms and activities and so on, and a little bit of a call of action, call to action for the community, basically. So how do we drive professional development in medical communications? So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rebecca to kick us off. In the audience, please, we've got a presentation and some Q&A, so please do use the text boxes to share any observations or comments or questions. But Rebecca, over to you.
Thanks, Peter. So I will kick off the introductions. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Douglas. I'm Group Programme Director for Talent here at IPG Health MedComms, and I also sit on the Professional Development Committee for the HCA. So I'm really super passionate about the importance of continuous professional development. So I'm really pleased to be here with you today, and I'm looking forward to the discussions at the end. And I'll pass over to you, Hannah.
Thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Hannah Brocklehurst, HR Manager at IPG Health MedComms. And just for those of you who might not be aware, IPG Health MedComms is part of the IPG Health Network, which also forms part of IPG. So this is a global network, and within MedComms specifically, we have a number of agencies. So that's Cordex, CMC Affinity, CMC Connect, Complete Health Vision, Complete Regulatory, as well as Trio, Pro Health, and Area 23 on Hudson. So collectively, we have over 800 employees based in countries across the globe. And naturally, I guess, investing in and supporting people is a key part of my role as HR manager. And this involves supporting employees directly, but also focusing on the development of our line managers. So again, it's really great to be part of this discussion about driving professional development. And I'll pass over to Holly.
Hi, thank you for having me today. My name is Holly Oates. I am a medical writer at one of our agencies, CMC Connect, which is part of the broader IPG Health Medical Communications. And I'm going to be talking a bit today about my experience starting out in MedComms. And Helena.
Thanks, Holly. Hi, everybody. Great to see so many people here today. Looking forward to the discussion. I'm Helena Williams, Head of Medical at CMC Connect. As we said, one of the agencies within IPG Health MedComms. And within the CMC Connect context, I head up a team of almost 80 medical services individuals across the full range of different role levels. And at the IPG Health MedComms level, I sit on various groups and committees that feed our own agency perspectives into the talent development initiatives that Rebecca's team leads. So it's a real passion area of mine as well. So very much looking forward to the discussion today. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect, we've got a few key areas that we want to look at today over the next 20 or so minutes. So we're going to share some reflections on how expectations in terms of the skills required by MedComms professionals have evolved over the last couple of decades. We'll show some really interesting research looking at the working preferences of different generations and discuss how we as a business have responded to the challenge of supporting the development of our multi-generational workforce. And finally, we'll hear from Holly, who's going to give us a personal account of her MedComms journey so far. So moving on to the next slide. Yep. We spend a lot of time right now, I think, thinking to the future and about how our roles might change going forwards as our clients embrace AI and we figure out the benefits it can bring to what we aim to achieve with our work. But while the rate of change going forwards will likely be much accelerated, it's also really interesting to look back over the past couple of decades and what that tells us about the evolution of our core skill set. And as I reflect on my career since joining the industry as a medical writer more than 20 years ago, there are a couple of things that I suppose stand out for me in terms of our evolving toolbox of skills. And for those of you on the line here today who also have lots of experience in MedComms, maybe you'll pull out very different observations. But for me, it's firstly that I just feel like it's actually an even more exciting area to work in now than it was when I joined. I feel like we have the opportunity now to create content for a much broader range of audiences, including lay and non-specialist audiences, and for many more channels as well. And I think in terms of skills, that provides so much more opportunity for all of us to kind of flex our creative muscles, I suppose, in terms of content development and recognize the use of things like behavioral science and data visualization that we can use to really focus on enhancing understanding, retention, and ultimately application to patient care, which is kind of what we all strive for, right? The second kind of reflection is that when I joined the industry, it feels like roles were much more distinct. As a writer, I would, write, and the client services team would manage the clients. But I think now we see much more of a need for all rounders across all functions, whether medical, client services, editorial, things like that. And actually, for both medical services and client services, there's much more of an overlap in skill sets required as a result of that. And we need everybody to be able to interact confidently with clients in lots of different ways. But I think this also gives us more flex to build project teams that really play to people's strengths and passions and to meet the specific and changing needs of our different clients. And my third point is that I feel like we're very much better now at providing the right training and support to set people up for success and also enabling that much more proactive career development. I often wish I'd had access to the great training programs that exist nowadays when I started, rather than being chucked in on day one and just being left to kind of figure things out the hard way. But that said, I think we'll discuss it in the context of the research that Hannah's going to be sharing and also our approach at IPG Health MedComms. We need to strike the right balance here in terms of providing a base level of knowledge and understanding, but also recognizing that getting stuck in is where most of that learning happens. So although we have, as MedComms professionals, always had to adapt to change, the rate of change is now exponential, and we need to be able to embrace and adapt to new technologies, processes, and workflow. And some of the core skills we've always relied upon, like attention to detail, for example, just to name one, become more important than ever at this pace of change, and particularly with AI. So just a bit of food for thought, I guess, to start us off. But I'd now like to hand over to Hannah, who's going to talk us through her award-winning research and what we need to be considering when we think about talent development in the context of different generations that make up our workforce.
Well, thanks, Helena. So as we're thinking about evolving talent, I think it's important to recognise that companies are becoming much more generationally diverse. And so it's really important that what we're offering our employees in terms of working environment, career development, and overall employee experience really evolves with the talent market and complements the needs and values of the diverse workforce. So at IPG Health MedComms, we really wanted to explore this further. So I was part of a team that conducted a research project into how we can engage a multi-generational workforce in medical communications. So our multi-generational workforce currently comprises of 4 generations, and that's baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, who are often called millennials, and Gen Z. And the typical characteristics of each generation are shaped by the state of the world at the time when people are growing up and coming of age. For example, a global financial crisis or the rise of the internet and social media can really impact people's perspectives and attitudes. So each generation brings its own skills and ways of doing things in the workplace, and understanding more about generational traits can really help us to better understand each other, motivate each other, and draw out each other's strengths. So across 2023, we ran an anonymous 37-question survey to really explore the different perspectives, preferences, and motivations of the 4 generations currently working within the IPG Health MedComms agencies. So unfortunately, we only had 15 baby boomer respondents, and not all of them answered all the survey questions. So whilst we did gather some limited data for this generation, we didn't attempt any interpretation given the small sample size. But we had plenty of respondents in the other generations. We gathered a large amount of data, but today we're just going to take a look at a couple of questions that we feel are particularly relevant to consider. So this question asked people to select the 3 things that they feel most motivated by in the workplace. So compared with Gen Z, you'll see the early generations appear more commonly motivated by interesting work, personal drive, and being part of a supportive team. These were actually the same top 3 most common motivations for both Gen X and Gen Y. Meanwhile, later generations appear increasingly motivated by career growth and development and work-life balance. Work-life balance was a theme that came through in several questions, and it seems to be a common priority actually across all generations, but increasingly common with each successive generation. And for Gen Z, it was actually the most common career goal and a more common goal than for any other generation. So we need to acknowledge that work-life balance is important to all, but particularly for Gen Z. And I think this might be reflective of the increasing acknowledgement or the importance of mental wellness in recent years, particularly growing up in a world where social media is so pervasive and the pace of life is so fast and screen focused. Safeguarding mental wellness has to be recognised as a key priority, and particularly for Gen Z. The increasing focus on learning and development and career growth was also a trend across many questions. And in addition to the data on this slide, more than 70% of people in Gen Z were attracted to MedComms by the opportunities for learning and progression, which I think can link back to the point that Helena made around the availability of more programs at the moment. And 77% of people in Gen Z also said that one of the top factors that would make them want to stay within the company would be opportunities for promotion and clear career pathways. So you could argue that this simply reflects the career stages that different generations are at. Many people in Gen Z are likely to be at an early stage of their career, and their current focus may be on progressing past that trainee level. Meanwhile, the previous generations may have already built up a lot of experience. Perhaps it's less of a driver for them to progress further, or perhaps opportunities for further progression are just more limited. So what we tried to do was level the playing field with this question by taking everyone back to the start of their MedComms career. So here we asked people if they targeted a specific time frame for their first promotion. And as you can see, there's a very clear trend. So the proportion of respondents targeting an ambitious time frame for their first promotion increased with each successive generation. And why is this? Well, the survey didn't really explore the reasons, but one theory is that it could come from the fact that Gen Z are the first generation to have grown up in the world of social media. And whilst that brings a lot of strengths, such as digital competence, digital awareness, it might have embedded expectations of more instant gratification due to having immediate access to digital content, but it also could have created enormous social pressures that might drive some competitiveness in achieving career goals such as promotions. So the survey question focused on expectations around first promotions to try and really standardise the question to some degree, because some respondents might not have actually yet progressed past that first promotion. And whilst we didn't specifically have any similar questions around subsequent promotions, we did ask survey respondents to select the top 5 factors that would make them want to stay. And like I said on the previous slide for this question, 77% of Gen Z selected the factor opportunities for promotion and clear career pathways. And that was only compared to 46% of Gen Y and 33% of Gen X. So it could be a trend that we see continue. So our research looked into the categories of getting started in MedComms, motivations, long-term career plans, remote and hybrid working, and learning preferences. I've talked a little bit about getting started in medical communications in terms of promotion expectations, as well as overall motivations. So in the interest of time, I won't touch on these further, but I will provide a bit of a top line on the other areas. So in terms of long-term career plans, most people wanted to find the right company to work for most of their career, but this does decrease slightly as the generations progress. Data around remote and hybrid working shows that Gen Z are actually the most frequently looking for an element of office-based working out of all the generations. So only 18% of Generation Z would ideally work from home all of the time, compared to around a third of the previous generations. And then when looking at learning preferences, there was no clear correlation or trend between the generations. Instead, what we found was a variety of learning styles were valued within each generational cohort. It was, however, interesting to see that Gen Z generally prefer human interaction in their learning experiences, which I think links back to what Helena said around that, recognizing the value of learning kind of on the job. And actually that was the most popular learning style across all of the generations. And Gen Z didn't value solo computer-based learning, which could potentially, I guess, be linked with digital fatigue, given the amount of digital exposures that they tend to have in day-to-day life. So finally then, just some key takeaways. I think if we want to attract and retain top talent, then we really need to be mindful of the priorities and motivations of each generation and be willing to evolve. The recommendation is that we need to be having regular and honest conversations with employees about work-life balance and career development. This is something that line managers should be doing. It's important for all generations, but particularly for those in Gen Z. It doesn't mean that we should feel pressure to give employees everything they want in terms of flexibility and promotions, as that isn't always possible and might depend on a variety of factors like their role, abilities, and the needs of the business. But at an absolute minimum, we can explore options with them, help them to manage their expectations, and let's acknowledge what's important to them and show that it's a priority for us as well. Ensure you have transparent and achievable career development pathways in place, so employees understand where they're currently performing and know how they can progress within their role and beyond their current role, and that they can do this at their own pace. Outside of promotions, as they're not always appropriate or possible, also think about alternative methods of recognition. And it's also important to appreciate that different employees, even within generations, might want to be recognised in different ways. Finally, just a reminder that grouping people into generations can be a helpful approach for exploring overall trends, but everyone is an individual and should be treated as such. So let's recognise and celebrate the strengths of different generations to keep them engaged and help them reach their full potential. And I'll hand over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Hannah and Helena. I think there was some really thought-provoking discussion points there, so I will look forward to hearing what other people are saying shortly. I've seen a couple of comments coming up in the chat. I'm going to move on now to pick up on a couple of those themes in the context of what we can or what we should be doing as an industry to support professional development, given the important points that both Helena and Hannah have raised about our evolving industry and the people working in it. So fundamentally for me, I think it's about how we put continuous development and therefore continual improvement and evolution really at the heart of everything that we do. And that's on lots of levels. So as individuals, as teams, as companies, and as an industry, because that's really how we drive innovation and how we excel. And I think that it's about recognizing that every small change that we make adds up to a bigger picture. So continuous professional development isn't something that happens and it's done. It's something that needs to span the length of our careers. So it is about those small incremental changes and improvements one at a time. And that's how we improve things for our clients, for the healthcare communities, and ultimately for patients. So the first thing that we wanted to raise is that recognition that continuous development is much more than formal training. We've got lots of great formal training in place across the industry now, but it's much more than that. And I think that once we recognise that as individuals, actually we realise that we're developing all the time and everything else kind of falls into place in the picture. And we know that there are lots and lots of different learning styles out there, and that actually for most people, as Hannah said, it's a combination of learning styles that really helps them to learn and to apply their learning. So within IPG Health MedComms, we use a 70-20-10 talent development framework, which really means that the bulk of learning, so around 70%, and that's 70% of learning, not 70% of time, happens mindfully on the job. 20% is about learning from others, and 10% comes from those high quality training opportunities. And I think the emphasis there is really on the quality. And I know that there are lots of other frameworks out there around learning and that other companies will be following that kind of follow a similar philosophy. Once we recognise that people learn in different ways, we then need to think about how we support all those different ways of learning to make them into mindful kind of development opportunities. So when we think about on the job opportunities and how we support them, a big part of that is about finding different opportunities for people to stretch and develop. And we know that we can learn so much from broadening our experience to different clients, to different types of accounts, to different stages of the product life cycle, and lots more beside. And with those opportunities, we really need to be asking ourselves, are we encouraging a culture of reflective learning? Because that's so important. Are we asking that really important question, what did we learn? Not just what did we deliver, but what did we learn? And are those learnings then being translated into positive actions? Do people have the tools, the checklists, the coaching, the feedback that they need to successfully achieve stretch within their role and therefore develop? And really importantly, are we empowering people and are we providing them with the space to innovate? And that can be really tricky because we work in a delivery-focused industry and it's busy. But unless we let people try things and try them knowing that they won't always succeed first time, we're really denying them the opportunity for growth and the opportunities for our business and for our industry to evolve and to progress. And then finally, but really importantly, is line manager support and training. So line management is a skill that needs to be developed. We can all get better all the time as a line manager. It's never job done. We're all individuals, as Hannah said. And so it's about playing to each individual's strengths. So we really need to challenge ourselves as businesses to see if there's anything more that we can and we should be doing to upskill our line managers. And then another area that we wanted to touch on was providing a focus on continuous professional development at every stage of the career life cycle. There can be a tendency to kind of focus on entry level or focus on a particular business need, but there's always more that all of us can be doing to learn. And so the approach that we've taken to continuous professional development at IPG Health MedComms is a series of development programs that really accompany people throughout their full career journey. And the important thing is that each program is relevant to both the needs of the business, but also can be tailored to the needs of the individual. So they have to be flexible enough that people can tailor them to their development needs and goals. And that people can apply any learnings in a practical setting. So it's got to be kind of right intervention, right time. And then importantly, just cultivating that culture of continuous improvement across all areas of the business. Again, you know, there can be a tendency to focus on client-facing deliverables, client-facing staffs, but it's really about increments of improvement across every area of the business. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on that recognition that development is really a team sport, if you like, and that a team is really important in identifying opportunities for people and really cultivating that culture in which individuals want to seize opportunities too, because we all know that whilst the people around us can do a lot, actually nobody should care more about our development than we do. So that philosophy is really important, but we need to enable people to work in a culture that allows them to think like that. And I think to achieve everything that we've already discussed, obviously the resource needs to be in place. Creating high quality opportunities takes time and it requires us all to be driving in the same direction. And every business will be set up slightly differently, but one of the ways that we've approached that at IPG Health MedComms is to put some specific roles in place that are dedicated to supporting that strategy of continuous improvement. So, for example, we've put in place a development director role, and our development directors sit alongside people in agency and coach and mentor them and really help them to stretch and to develop. And they're also very involved in our strategy and rollout of learning, formal learning across all of our agencies, because they're involved in the day-to-day as well, so they know where the needs are. So if I circle back to the original slide, it all comes back to that ethos about putting continuous development and therefore continuous improvement really at the heart of everything that we're doing, because that's how, as a business and as an industry, we can really drive innovation and excellence for our clients, which is what we all want to do. So with that, I will pass over to Holly for her perspective on continuous professional development and how she's integrating that focus into her role.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. So yeah, I'm Holly. As I said earlier, I'm a medical writer at CMC Connect, part of IPG Health, and I'm relatively new to the industry. So I started out as an associate medical writer early in 2023, and I made the jump to medical writer in November. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience with learning and development in my sort of early career in MedComms. So as Rebecca mentioned, we have the Fuel program for sort of entry-level roles, and then North Star for more experienced talent. And I've been through the Fuel program, and I'm now in North Star, which is much more flexible and kind of a place where you could tailor the kind of learning and development to your own needs as you grow, and depending on the kind of work that you do, which has been really good. I think what's been striking looking back over the last sort of year and a half in MedComms is just how much you learn, especially in that first year, in such a short space of time. And as Helena touched on, I found that being a medical writer really isn't just about written skills, even though, of course, they are important. You really, from the get-go, need to be developing into an all-rounder. You need to be able to confidently interact with your colleagues and with clients and build those relationships. I think that's where that 70-20-10 model that Rebecca talked about has been really valuable, because that 10% of time in structured workshops and learning and courses is really important. But where you really learn and develop and grow, I think, is that 20% where you're being coached and mentored, and the 70% where you're given space to go and learn on your own and do the job and learn from your mistakes and reflect. So as part of Fuel and North Star, I've been able to gain the credits to work towards HCA certification, which I really recommend people to do. It's a great way to keep track of your own development and see how far you've come. It's really solidified for me the value of reflecting on what you've learned, as you kind of have to do that for every credit. And it's, I think, as well as doing that for your workshops and formal courses, it's great to reflect on just projects that you've done. You know, when you finish something, maybe it's a manuscript, maybe it was an ad board, think, what have I done here? What have I learned? What could I have done better? And taking that reflective style of learning away from just sort of classroom or workshop style learning into what you do day to day has been really valuable for me. So I think the last thing I wanted to touch on from my experience was the value of mentoring. So having mentors, both people that you work with day to day on projects, but also people who might be in a different part of the business, who can give you slightly more top level advice on how you can develop in your role, is really important. And it gives you that support to actually drive your own development. As Rebecca said, that no one should care more about your own development than you do. But having that right support means you feel empowered to develop yourself. So I definitely feel like I've really gained confidence, especially in the last 6 months being part of North Star, to have more independence and ownership over my projects, which has been really valuable. And finally, as part of our Fuel program, I've been able to be a buddy for a new AMW who started later last year, which has been a really great experience and a good way to reflect on how far I've come, and also just provide that support to someone who's closer to being a peer, which I think is really valuable. So I would really recommend to anyone at all to get involved in mentoring, but especially if you're just in the first few years of your career, you still have learnt a lot and you can offer a lot. So thank you for listening, and I'll pass back to Helena to round off for us.
Thanks, Holly. Really great to hear your perspective, and I can certainly vouch for the fact that you've created and embraced so many different opportunities since you've been with us. So thanks for sharing your experience. So before we open up for comments, questions, hopefully some discussion, I guess just wanted to kind of finish with our call to action, which is kind of just pulling out, I guess, what's been spoken about so far. But I think overall, you know, our success as an industry is all about our people. And the way we evolve and innovate to meet the ever changing needs of the environment that we work within is through providing that professional development for our people. So I think there have been so many different considerations that have been hopefully brought through for you all today, providing that kind of opportunity for continuous improvement through both formal, but very importantly, that kind of informal on-the-job training, empowering people to take the space to try new things and to reflect on what they're doing and what they've learned, what's worked well and what hasn't, to consider some of the different drivers and motivators and strengths and passions of the people in our team. These are all considerations that we really must put at the heart of everything we do so that we continue to evolve and innovate as an industry. So with that, I'm hoping that you'll have lots of questions for us. We'll open it up to all of you.
Fantastic, thanks. Thanks everybody, that was great. I think that was great, actually. So thank you very much. It was very comprehensive, and it was very interesting to hear what you're doing yourselves, but also those wider principles. I always say the same thing in these sorts of meetings. I've been around a while, and I reflect a little bit on what it was like when I first came into MedComms, and it was very much, I think, Helen, you said it was like you're thrown in a little bit. I mean, training's always been an important part of, I think, the business, and I think people rightly argue that. But it wasn't very structured and organized in the way that it is these days. And I think companies like yours leading the way, absolutely great. Thank you very much. I'd like to broaden it though, first off, and to the HCA side of things, because in fact we've just lost there's a question in there about the certification. So but Rebecca, can I ask you, your North Star program has just been accredited by HCA. Let's recognize the HCA is out there trying to champion the development within medical communications. They've got a platform, they've got an accreditation system and so on. Can you do a couple of things, because you are on their committee? Can you tell us a little bit about what they're doing for the wider industry, and also just talk a little bit about that process you went through to get your own program accredited? I think they're talking accredited, just so that people understand that. And then I'd finish by, again, just to plug, I'm giving you the words here, but as I understand it, the HCA initiative is about empowering individuals and providing a platform, whether you're a member or not, to track your CPD and so on. So can you just try and, without going into too much detail, because I can look it up, but give us a few minutes on what's happening at the HCA in terms of that wider industry picture and how you've interrelated with it. Is that making sense?
Yeah, so the HCA, as you know, do lots of different things. So they have like an innovation work stream, they have a briefing room, they do lots of things to try and encourage high standards in professional development across our industry. In terms of the HCA certification and the HCA accreditation, it's two different things. So HCA certification is for individuals, and that is to bring us in line with other industries like architecture and medicine and dentistry and other professionals where actually people accredit their continuous professional development frequently every year. And so HCA had a vision to do that within, or to provide the facility to do that within healthcare communications. So there is a portal, and you register with the HCA. It's free, it's open to everybody, and basically you track your CPD throughout a 12-month period. And around each activity, you're asked some questions, you're asked for your reflections, and we really embraced the idea of HCA certification early doors. It's been launched for just over 12 months now, and the reason that we did that was because it very nicely dovetailed with everything that we were trying to do in terms of really encouraging that culture of focus on professional development and of reflective learning. And what we really liked about the setup of the HCA certification is that it's not all about formal training. So you can get credits for doing lots of different things. So if you're developing your skills in AI, for example, all of that kind of time and reflection would count towards a package of CPD credits. So you accumulate 32 credits within the year, and once you've got to that 32 credit threshold, you submit it. It goes via the HCA portal and goes to your line manager. Your line manager has to look at what you've done, put their name to it and say, yeah, they agree that you've done it and you've done that reflection around it. And then you receive your HCA certification, and you get a logo that you can display for a 12-month period on your emails, etc. But more importantly, you can look back at all the reflection and all the growth and development that you've done during the year. So we don't mandate it for any of our staff, but we do tell people about it. We do encourage them. And we now have more than 150 people actually actively tracking their CPD in the HCA portal, which I think, it's in its infancy. So I think that's a good number of people that think actually this is something that's really important and we're going to do it. So yeah, that's the individual certification. And then in terms of the accreditation, that's about recognising standards in the industry. So for North Star, we wanted to have a go at this. The HCA accreditation was introduced in December last year. So in January, we gathered all of our North Star materials, which are numerous, and we submitted them to the HCA. You pay a fee. It depends on the size of your course, what the fee is. They don't make a profit from it, but it goes to an external verifier. They look at it for standard of learning, basically, and if it meets the required standard, you'll either get comments or you'll get the accreditation back. So yeah, we did that for North Star. We were really, really proud to get it. North Star was a massive thing for us when we first developed it, but it's also a living initiative and we're kind of improving it all the time. So yeah, we did that and we received our accreditation about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, cool. Okay, the people can go off and have a look in more detail, but I just think it's really important in the sense of what we're doing today to champion something like that as an industry initiative and to point people at what's going on. And congratulations on what you've done. And talk about award winning, Hannah. You got your award. Was it last week or the week before, Matt, when you were presenting your multi-generational poster and so on? I find that absolutely fascinating. And I suppose my frustration when I was listening to you talk, because I think there's a lot more detail there that I would have liked to have heard about, I guess. But my main question, I think, is having done it within IPG, which is a big company, so you had reasonable numbers. But there must be an argument to say this would be interesting to do much broader. And across the industry and maybe through the HCA or something. I just wonder whether there's any plans to do that, because at the moment one argument could be that, well, that's fine, it's interesting, but it's your self-selected group of people, sort of thing. Okay, but I think there's quite an interesting exercise in there. If you could be broader, have you got any plans to do that?
Currently no plans to expand it wider, but it's an interesting point, and actually being able to present it at the ISMAP meeting in the US meant that I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people within the industry, and what they were saying when they were looking at the results on the poster was that actually it's in line with what they're seeing within their companies as well. So I do think the results that we've seen are industry wide. There wasn't much disagreement in terms of what they're seeing within their companies versus what we've got available here. I'd go as far to say it's probably some of the results are wider than just the MedComms industry and actually are probably seen within other industries as well. But most of the conversations generally aligned with what we're seeing here. So no plans to expand further, but I do think there's a lot of learnings that everyone could apply from what we've got.
I think absolutely, and yes, I can imagine it chiming with a lot of people, but I'm certainly I'm not aware anyway of anybody else within our marketplace who has looked at that question within their own company. I just think that would be a really interesting exercise to do across the community. I suppose an obvious question, being slightly flippant about it, but why so few baby boomers? Are they by definition just older, more senior, and therefore think they're more important than, or what? Are you willing to say anything about what you think, why you didn't get the baby boomers joining?
I think, yeah, generally it was a lesser population. So within our organisation, the majority,
less anyway, yeah.
We're almost 50% kind of millennial at Gen Y anyway, so the proportion was lesser and just fewer completions. Not sure why, but generally we would have expected a lower amount based on the population group we've got anyway.
Okay, that's very diplomatic. Okay, I'm keeping an eye on the questions coming up. Again, an obvious point maybe. It sounds very impressive, but we made the point to begin with, and thank you for describing the IPG organization. It's a big organization, yeah. Some of what you're talking about and the way you talked about it, there's quite a lot of resource thrown behind this. You've got a whole battery of development directors and so on and so forth. I suppose an obvious question, which I feel like just an obvious question is, do you have to be your sort of size to implement the sort of program you're talking? I know I'm expecting you to say no, but you are coming at this from the point of view of an organization with a lot of resource to support. If I'm a little agency of 20, 30 people, I guess the principle I buy into, but I'm actually quite busy doing project work. So how much was, can you see what I'm getting at? I just wonder what your reflections are on how a small agency might be able to cope. And Rebecca, I'm sort of looking at you.
Yeah, every agency is set up differently, and we invest a lot in this because we really believe in it. But I think even within the small agencies, it's about recognizing that when everybody gets better, everyone can deliver more. So actually investing a proportion of time in it enables revenue across the business. So my answer would be yes. I think every company can and should be doing stuff to help the professional development of people. It doesn't have to be on the scale of Fuel and North Star and the People Manager Programme and the Leadership Development Programme. But I do think that every company has it within their power to put in place resources or to signpost people to those resources that exist elsewhere in the industry. So the HCA does courses on marketing to molecules to marketing, I think is running today. If you can't do it in business, then I think that the ability to outsource is there as well. So I think it's achievable one way or another.
Okay. And I think also just, I guess, to add a point there, obviously we talked a lot about the 70-20-10 philosophy that we work to, and the absolute importance of that 70%. And actually having worked in smaller agencies myself, those kinds of environments often provided lots of opportunity to get involved in a variety of different things that perhaps in a bigger agency you wouldn't, and also the opportunity to work with more senior people more closely. So you're kind of being having access to the experience and opportunities perhaps that really help to enhance that 70% as well. So I think I just wanted to add that point.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point.
And it's a cultural and a mentality type thing, isn't it? I mean, and it is about the individual taking responsibility. I think there's no point just sitting there and expecting the organization to provide for you. You want to drive forward and develop yourself, sort of thing. But there's a couple of questions come in about this sort of, how much time is appropriate to devote to non-billable training. Let's be honest, we're in challenging times at the moment. There's a lot of pressure on everybody to get that work out the door and so on and so forth. So there's a tricky balance to be struck, isn't there, when you're sort of looking at resourcing and the work of the organization.
And I think that balance is different for every individual as well, which is why whatever you do needs to be tailorable. I don't think that's a word, but you know what I mean. Able to be tailored to individuals, because some people will have much more of a need than others at different points in their career. And so it's about finding that balance at different points. I'm not really a fan of mandating a number of hours, because that takes away that ability to tailor. And like Helena said, that ability to coach and to mentor on the job and to really complement that with the formal training when it's needed. But formal training doesn't need to look like a workshop. I think that's really important. So part of formal training can be having a checklist that you go through on the job. You know, formal training doesn't need to look like an e-learn or a workshop. That part of it's important. There's definitely a place for it, and it's definitely a place for high quality formal training, but it doesn't need to look as we think about it in the traditional sense.
And I think also,
sorry.
sorry, I was just going to jump in there with another point as well. I think that kind of making sure that the kind of training, whether it be formal, informal, you know, on the job, whatever, is really kind of tailored to what's relevant for that individual. So, you know, you're not doing learning, you're not spending time doing non-billable, you know, learning for the sake of it. It's because it has a direct relevance to the role that you're playing with, you know, in terms of the client work that you're doing. And I think that's, you know, that's an important focus, because I think ultimately any kind of learning that you do, until you apply it to something, you know, something in your role, that's kind of when it's reinforced and when you know, you really benefit from that. So
Okay, Holly, I'm just going to bring you in and just ask, practically speaking, just again, just follow that with a little bit of a sense of how you juggle, you know, doing your client work or doing the training and so on. Just give us a sense of how you manage that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a case of planning, for one thing. If you know that it's something that you want to do, especially that is more formal, like a workshop, is be able to say, right, I can squeeze this in at this point in my week. I think also having a culture within teams that says, you know what, let's be flexible. You can go ahead and do this bit of training, or this is valuable for you to do, so we can work around it. I think it's really important. I know in my teams, if somebody says, oh, there's an North Star thing I'm going to go to, do you mind? I'll be off my emails from 3 till 4. Everybody supports that, rather than going, oh no, this needs to be done. And I think that bit of attitude and culture, mentoring, and encouragement is really helpful in being able to squeeze that in. But it's certainly not an easy thing to do. It's not like we've all got oodles of time in the day.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, but and I'm going to flip around a couple of quick questions just to finish with, because we'll go over time again. Anonymous, I always love the fact Anonymous comes in with the questions. Is asking, and I guess this is directed at Hannah a little bit. Or Hannah, can you speak to this? Interested to hear your perspective on how the training opportunities that you offer influence your recruitment, and therefore the makeup of the employers, and how that might have impacted the survey results. But let's just take that at its basic level. How does the training that you're offering and talking about, do you see that impacting in the terms of the recruitment activity that you're involved in?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot more, and I guess not just within the MedComms industry, of these kind of formal training programs at that entry level. So I think that's becoming an expectation of people, probably at that entry level. So I expect that that's not necessarily driving people just to us. I think that's an attractive thing that a lot of companies are offering now. I think the opportunities that we have following the entry level programs, so North Star, we have the people manager program as well, that's very tailored to development at the line manager level, I think gives people those reassurances that the continuous development is something that we're really committed to. It's not something we're saying we're doing. We have these programs in place. We have people being successful, talking about them in the recruitment process, is really kind of inviting those people in who are committed themselves to wanting to develop, people that are looking to really commit their career to something. And I think that links back to my data was around that most people actually across all generations want to find the right company to work for, and they want to stay there. And I think they can see that if they're motivated by development, that's something they can absolutely get with us. So maybe that has influenced the answers that people were given. Like you said, Peter, is it skewed to just our company? Actually, a lot of people within our company might want to stay and have that longevity because of the continuous programs that we're offering.
I do think, just a general point, I do think it's interesting that people do fit within certain sorts of agencies, and sometimes it's difficult to sort of quite identify quite what the reasons are. But you know, someone that's very happy at agency A is not happy at agency B, and part of the recruitment process is trying to make sure that the person coming in, you know, understands that it's not all the same. So anyway, that's an important part of the recruitment process, and it's important that people think about that as they're coming in. but I was going to probably just finish. Maybe we should just finish with Helena. Just as an observation, maybe I'm going to again be slightly flippant about this, Helena, and I'm not being rude, but you know, I find some of that data really interesting. I'm coming back to the survey, but Helena, one of the obvious problems is you have got very different approaches within. I mean, I'm stating the obvious within the different generations. So as you get older, you're a line manager or whatever. You're by definition in the different sort of level. I just wonder practically how much problem you've had with some of those few baby boomers sort of understanding how to help and support the sort of the Gen Z sort of thing. I mean, in practice, how much of a gulf is there, and how much support do you have to give the line managers, particularly the more up that spectrum they go?
Yeah.
Or doesn't that actually worry people in practice? It just seems to me, on the basis of the data, that you've got potentially quite a gulf between the thinking at the two ends of the spectrum. I just wonder what practical problems or issues that raises.
I mean, in my experience, I don't think it raises huge problems. I think that we put a lot of emphasis into the learning and development of our line managers as much as everybody else, and I think that there is that kind of commitment to that role, and sort of seeing the importance of that role and being able to adapt and adjust your approach to different individuals and what they're looking for, what their motivators and drivers are, and really understand what they're looking for out of their career and be able to kind of tailor your approach accordingly. So that's a big part of what the expectation that we put on line managers, and actually people don't need to be line managers if they don't want to do that role, but if they do that role, they commit fully to it. And I think it's our people manager program is set up to help them to be able to be good line managers to whomever they may be line managing, and minimize any risk of there kind of being that sort of potential for disconnect in different between different generations. So I haven't seen any issues as a result of that.
Okay, all right, excellent. Okay, on that note, because we are slightly over as usual, I'm going to draw a line there. Thank the audience for their comments and questions, which we're collecting, so keep them coming. I'm going to draw a line on the recording, so if you're sitting listening to this at the moment, don't all run away. We've got a few minutes, we can carry on talking. I can speak for you panelists, I know, and say that anybody can contact you. Part of the point of these webinars is simply to make connections, so anybody watching this now or later on the recording, please reach out. LinkedIn is an easy way of doing that. Obviously, if I can help, then reach out to me or look at medcommsnetworking.com for details of what's happening. But I thought that was really interesting, so thank you very much. I'm going to wish you all a good day, and after the panelists, give us a little wave and we'll stop the recording. Take care. Bye.